When we were building it, we included the risk department, we included compliance, we included retail. So throughout the internal development cycle, there was a feedback loop with bankers in mind. And that was a big difference from every other partner that we tried or platform, because they had a potential platform that we can implement, but there was a lot of rework that had to be done to take banking into consideration and make it work for us as a community bank.
Welcome in, everybody. You're listening to Wrestling Payments, a podcast where we help payment professionals contend with the challenges of modernizing their payments operations and identifying ways to build for the future. If you're interested in payments innovation and modernization, you're in the right place. Now, let's get into it.
And welcome to Wrestling Payments. I have very special guests today and a really fantastic story. It's something I'm really curious about. And I'm gonna let the guests introduce themselves and then go from there.
Hi,
Raphael?
I'm Ingrid Hebert, and I'm the Director of Service Delivery and Implementation at Mascoma Technologies.
Hi, and I'm Raphael Reznek. I am the CTO of Mascoma Bank and President of Mascoma Technologies.
I am so glad you said both those things together, because NEACH is a member organization. We have member banks, but you threw in Mascoma Technology, and it's a really interesting story. First of all, what is Mascoma Technology?
You want me to take that, Ingrid?
Go for it. It's your brainchild.
Okay. Mascoma Technologies is a wholly owned subsidiary of Mascoma Bank, and we launched it so that we could share the technology that we've built to integrate with modern platforms at Mascoma Bank with other financial institutions.
And that's the story, right? That's so interesting, because in today's fintech world, people are out looking for solution providers and who does what piece of it and who does another piece of it. Or maybe you're with a traditional fintech and they have a whole product offering. But you said, no, we're going to do it ourselves. Can you tell me, how did you get to that decision? What are the forces around that?
Well, we started looking at decomposing our tech stack and attempting to compose something new, adding components, adding fintechs, or having some form of decision in what products we were purchasing and what products we could offer to our customers. And it's very difficult for a small community financial institution to do that. The tools were just not there. And there are providers that can make it difficult for you to incorporate other platforms. So we started decomposing it and really determined that it was a bit of a Jenga tower. You pull the wrong block and the whole thing comes tumbling down. So what we did is we stopped trying to decompose it initially and determined that perhaps we should look at how we can inject new platforms into the current ecosystem while still running the current ecosystem. So if we wanted a new generation core, but we wanted it to run alongside all of our other platforms as if it were part of the existing tech stack, we would have to inject that into the existing tech stack. So that's how we approached it. And the goal was giving choice back to ourselves, give the ability to choose. That, it's an automatic no currently, and we wanted to make it a decision. So maybe it's a no, maybe it's a yes, but we at least have a decision to make or choice in the matter. So that's how it came about.
What gets you to that point? Because I'm familiar with the way it is, not really deeply familiar with the way it is, but generally familiar with the way it is. You usually see fintechs pop up and say, I want to enter the banking space. Or the traditional guys saying, we're going to add these new services. We're going to acquire this one. We're going to build that internally. This is a big build decision for a community bank. How did you get there? What advice could you offer others considering the same thing?
For us, I think it has been a journey. We're at like year 6 of this journey, where when we started, we thought, well, maybe we can partner with someone else to build this. So we looked at potential platforms that said they could do what we were looking for. And, 2 years down the road, we find out, well, it's not exactly what we were looking for. So then we readjust, we pivot, we said, okay, can we build this internally? And then you go into, okay, do we have the right team members to build this internally? Do we probably need our own development team? And slowly but surely, we came to the realization that if what we wanted is not out there yet, and we needed to build it.
Fantastic. Anything else on that point, Raphael?
Yes, I would add to what Ingrid has said, in that the tech itself is not necessarily novel. It exists in other industries. There are plenty of tools, even online tools, where you can sign up and connect 2 systems or 3 or 10, and they integrate. There's so many platforms that integrate with Salesforce, for example, and it's not necessarily a headache to make it happen. So we wanted to bring that type of technology into our institution. But the actual novel component of it is combining that technology with the regulatory requirements, the compliance, and the governance necessary to operate within a community FI. So that's really what we did, is we combined a more modern technology with the community FI knowledge. And so it's not, what we build is not a point-to-point integration tool that you might find existing out there. It's really a data hub with governance, compliance, and regulatory oversight in mind, knowing that as an FI, we're being audited all the time, and we have to be able to support what we say is occurring with an audit, or an examination. So it's built with that capability in mind.
And when we were building it, we included the risk department, we included compliance, we included retail. So throughout the internal development cycle, there was a feedback loop with bankers in mind. And that was a big difference from every other partner that we tried, or platform, because they had a potential platform that we can implement, but there was a lot of rework that had to be done to take banking into consideration and make it work for us as a community bank.
Right. I mean, regulation is huge. It's a fintech could probably dodge, and correct me if I'm wrong, dodge a little bit of the compliance. They're going to put it on ultimately the financial institution. But in your case, you incorporated that. Did you, when you were doing that piece, and don't, if I ask any questions, I'm going to ask questions. Feel free not to answer any secret sauce questions, but did you have regulators involved in that part? Was there hey, here's what we're going to do? Do you see any problems with that?
Absolutely. I personally meet with the regulators on almost a quarterly basis.
Great.
Our regulator in particular.
Sure. And where was the nugget of the beginning? What was the straw that broke the camel's back? That one thing that made you say, you know what, there's got to be a better way. Let's do it ourselves.
It was when our chief marketing officer came to me and said, hey, and this is when I first started with Mascoma Bank, and I don't have a banking background. I have a technology background. So our chief marketing officer came to me and asked a question about our debit cards and wanting to implement some programs around local purchasing and just some things we wanted to do to apply to what our customers were doing at point of sale. And so we started digging in, and I call it the Frankenstein model. You can bolt some stuff on. It's generally a batch operation. You're reactive. So you're getting data a day, 2 days, a week, a month later, after the transaction is old, and you're not involved in that customer experience. So we determined that we don't want to be involved a week after it's happened. We want to be involved as it's occurring. That's when we can best serve our customer. And because of the super tight coupling between our card processor and our core provider, we couldn't insert ourselves. It was always after the fact. So we determined that we needed to be able to insert ourselves into the transaction as it's occurring, meaning we had to be aware of the transaction as it's occurring and be able to act. That was really the sweater thread we started pulling on, and just kept pulling on it and pulling on it and pulling on it until, there's obviously you're left with that bare core system and the transaction engines and how they interoperate and how we do or do not have access to that data. And in most cases, we do not.
So I can ask you this question because you came in, and this might be this might make the pre-rail. Most of the time, people don't think about how payments work, how they flow, how the systems operate. And we even had a class called "It's Not Magic." Were you surprised coming into the banking system that things weren't more automated and interconnected and easy?
Yes. Prior to coming into banking as a customer of the banking system, I had this preconceived notion that it was all modernized and automated and I had nothing to worry about. Right. Pulling the curtain back and taking a look, it's very scary. Mm-hmm. How many systems it takes and how many different organizations and people have to put their hands on the data for it to flow properly, and how much manual effort there is in the system. All of this, there's a tremendous amount of process debt that has been built around these legacy systems, I'll call them, because of the technical debt. Mm-hmm. So there's this debt that just keeps compounding at the financial institution. And pretty soon you have people doing manual processes and they're not sure why they're doing them. That's the way we do it. Mm-hmm. So yes, I was quite surprised.
Ingrid, were you around during when Raphael came on?
I came in about a year or two after he did. I've been in banking for about 16 years. I've always been surprised though with the decisions that bankers have to make. So there's a lot of potential platforms out there with new technology, but when you're considering a new vendor, you're left with, well, do we want to have integration within our back-end systems, or do we want to have a good customer experience? Mm-hmm. And oftentimes you couldn't get both with one platform. You had to make a choice. Like the customer has a good experience, but then you have a back end where that requires a lot of manual intervention, or you have the back end systems integrated into each other, digital banking into core, into payments, but then the customer experience looked like we're still in the 90s. So coming into Mascoma and seeing what they were trying to achieve and all of the new technology and the frame of thinking, like you don't have to choose one or the other. We're going for both. We're going for everything.
Let me interrupt. What is the vision?
Yeah. I think for me, coming in and being in this for 5 years, I think the vision is having the ability to not compromise. So as a financial institution, a small community bank, being able to see a fintech out there or a new platform and being able to easily integrate that new platform or system into your current environment and not have to compromise on customer experience, not have to compromise on automation, on security, and access to your data and your customers' data.
Excellent. So let's talk about, so I have to tell a story, right? So we have to talk about, when Luke has to kill the Death Star. So when did you think, we're in trouble? Did you ever think, we're in trouble?
I think there were several moments.
Yeah.
And what happened to take you out of that? Was it, I'll just leave it open. What happened? Did someone come into the rescue? Did you solve your own problem?
I
I would
can't tell
say,
you how many times we've pivoted.
I,
Because, when Raphael said in the beginning, we were looking at cards and that card payments rail and how do we improve that? And initially, that was our ultimate goal, like having our own platform for card and card processing. And we moved further into that path and said, well, that's only a piece of the customer experience and a piece of access to our data. Cards is only a small piece that sits over here. How do we get to like the center of it all? And then pivoting from cards to, okay, how do we become the place where everything coming into our core or our systems touch base with us before it flows out somewhere else?
Raphael, anything else? That's if you're not a banker or you're not in payments or you're not in finance, that was exciting. So anything to add to that? That was excellent.
no, I think Ingrid described it quite well.
Okay. And then who did you find so sorry, we tell a story brand here, and part of the story is who's the guide? You're the hero because you're going through the challenges, the development. Who was your guide through this? Was it the regulators? I would guess it wasn't fintechs because they said, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we can't do that.
I think that's been part of the issue, Joe, is that there are not really a lot of people that can guide one through this. And in fact, we have found zero people who have in a community FI implemented a platform that allows for multiple cores to run behind the scenes and to give the FI access to the data before it even hits the core. But we haven't found anybody that's actually done that in a community FI. I think
are there many at all that do similar?
There are a few, yes.
Few.
I would say
Okay.
there are some, the larger institutions build their own data hubs. There are some smaller ones that have been successful. I know of a few that have built somewhat of what we've built, but it's internal. They've not commercialized it or attempted to commercialize it.
Excellent.
So, but there are a few that have done some of what we've done.
Okay. And along the way, were there any surprises? And when I say surprises, good surprises, things that you found that, oh, hey, if we just do this one more thing, this all flows together. Anything like that?
Yes. Yeah, I would say one of the good surprises we found is that when we built out some of our change data capture, data broker capabilities, this is what synchronizes systems so that you can manage multiple cores with a single pane of glass. And we've moved our customer system of record out of the core, but we still have to keep it synchronized. So as you can imagine, we've been on our legacy core for over 30 years. The data in that system was not necessarily governed well. So when we built our system of record outside the core in Salesforce, we built into the integration, into the synchronization data governance, so that when social security numbers and addresses and everything came across, if it was malformed or not the correct content, we would drop it into an exception queue for operations to take a look at. So we got it all set up, we turned it on, and all of a sudden the queue is filled with thousands of records. And the product and development team was like, oh goodness, operations is going to be super angry. And what we found out is that they were thrilled because they've never had anything that's told them that the data was malformed. So now, anytime there's malformed data coming from the core, it gets dropped into this exception queue and they can fix it. And then it's solved. We don't have to boil the ocean. They get to do it iteratively. and they're now made aware. So it was a lack of awareness in the past. So they were super thrilled. And it's now a really cool feature in the system, is that you can now practice data governance against your core or cores.
You touched on so many things there. That was, I followed along. I don't know if you saw me clapping when everything popped out. That's great. For the folks who don't listen a lot, governance is how you organize your data. What are the rules that you follow along with the data? It wasn't like someone in charge of it who's the governor. And so
Right.
just to be clear, that was fantastic because you got it right where it needed to go. So much so you just distracted me from where I was going next. Governance. Oh, so I don't want to be telling stories here, but for folks unfamiliar with legacy systems, I think it may be, see if this analogy works. We need to update our systems. It needs to happen now. There's a new regulation, a new notch of rules, something that needs to be put in effect. If we just patch this right now, we'll be okay for a little while. And then that gets forgotten. And then the next rule change comes along and the next thing changes. And we could update everything or we could just make it so it works. It is 50 years of patches and gum and staples. So coming at it fresh, which is, for all those decisions along the way where you're like, well, it's a lot of wells to take in at once. So most people just say, well, we'll just do another patch. This is a fantastic approach because the standards haven't changed as far as file formats, card formats, but the technologies certainly have changed. And card add-ons, there's so many APIs and MasterCard Send, Visa Direct, all the other things that unless you're up to speed, you can't take advantage of. And then you find yourself, I think you mentioned this in the beginning, you're finding yourself doing a procedure because you can't do it that way, but you can have a person in the back, filling in the dots and crossing the T's.
That's
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, if you think about non-banking systems, if you think about other organizations that have access to Microsoft's full capabilities, Amazon's full capabilities, Salesforce, all of the AI that exists. Imagine if you could apply AI in financial institutions to your data, like you have access to the data, so you can apply AI to it. You can apply AI to connecting the systems. So the issue is really not that it couldn't be done. The issue is the amount of time and resources it takes to integrate at financial institutions. We're not talking weeks and months. We're talking years it takes to integrate systems. We need to compress that. We need to compress it into days to be able to connect systems in a financial institution. And that's our goal, is to compress that into days by having access to the latest technology, APIs, and then fronting, for example, one of our legacy cores has event streaming. So it will publish events that occur within the core system, but sometimes that takes upwards of 15 minutes for an event to be published. And in most cases, the data that was changed or added is not a part of the payload of the event. So we have to bring that legacy core up to our specifications. We have to build all of these tools for consuming the event, listening to the event stream, using the APIs for polling, and in some cases actually polling the database to build our own event driving capability with that legacy system. And we have to do that often. We have to front end, other systems so we can serialize, deserialize batch files and turn them into actual transactions that run across the APIs. So we have to do this so that we can implement quickly. We need to get that velocity to value to something respectable for an FI. There are many FIs that are constantly implementing and not getting a return on the system they've implemented because they implement it 70% of the way, and then they have to jump to the next thing because they don't have time to finish and get that value out of the system that they've just implemented. So we want to compress that time and make it much easier to implement these new platforms.
Especially for smaller financial institutions that don't have development teams, don't have the resources that large financial institutions have. It's hard to stay competitive as technology moves really quickly at a smaller financial institution. So part of what we're driving towards is being able to support community mutuals in the area and, throughout the nation to be able to stay competitive against those larger financial institutions that have the resources that they don't. And the platform that we're delivering allows them to stay nimble and deploy new technology a lot easier and quickly.
So, soapbox, if you're not in the industry, you're just listening for fun, the community bank is more than just another bank. It's connected to a neighborhood, a city, a town, a county, and they're involved in the county. So you may say, big bank has all of these features and services. Yeah, but they don't really know you. They don't know where the needs are. And you can't read this on paper. This is a real ingrained thing. So what you're saying is so important, especially for the folks that don't know. From a things that people don't know, could you compare processing transactions to something physical? Like the number of transactions you process a day. Is it like a mailbox full, a mail truck full, an 18-wheeler full? How do I think about how many transactions are flowing through the organization?
So our organization would be like a semi-truck full of letters. Okay. And then you have to manually pull each one out and sort it.
That question really was for me because I know what the banks do. I never imagined it. How much is that?
Yep.
Significant, really interesting. I wouldn't want to be on that trailer. Any other trips along the way? Any other challenges? And then we'll talk about the successes.
There's always the challenges that, the risks involved are great. Can a vendor deliver? Can an internal team deliver? Operationally, can the bank consume what we've built? Right? Are we prepared for that? Are the disclosures ready when we were ready to launch online account opening? Is everything lined up? It takes a lot to change, a 125-year-old institution who's used to doing things a certain way. And every institution is like this. They're used to doing things a certain way operationally. And change is not something that a financial institution is good at because you want consistency in the processing of transactions, right? So any variance in that, variance is what is required for innovation, but you don't want variance because you want that transaction to flow all the way through and not be impacted by any variance. So I would say one of the things we focused on early, and it was still difficult for us, was change management.
And building a
people
culture.
standpoint.
Yeah. And building a culture around change that's comfortable with change, because culture is really ingrained in banking. If you come into a financial institution that has had the same core system for 30 plus years, there's a lot of this is how we do things because we've always done it this way. So just opening up the conversation around the agile frame of thinking and comfort around change and evolving through that as we develop the technology, making sure that the culture within the bank is staying in sync with that.
I'm so glad you got there. It was one of the questions I forgot, but you reminded me as you were speaking. And I'll give this example. AI, you mentioned AI earlier. I think AI has so much potential. When I talk to members about AI, I don't get eye contact. I get a lot of looking away and a lot of just nods. from this endeavor, change is hard. I've been doing my job. I'm good at my job. I know what I'm doing. How did you, and I imagine there was challenges. I don't want to ask about them, but what was the shining building on the hill, or what was the incentive that brought people along?
I think it was a mix of things. A lot of the departments were used to, if we need a new feature or a new platform, we can go to a vendor, get something that's pre-built, we configure it, we deploy it, and we're done. So getting into the habit of, we're going to build something, it's going to be small, it's not going to have all the features you're looking for, we're going to iterate on that, and slowly it will build it into what you want, but it'll also be nimble so that by the time we deliver it to you, it'll be what you need now, and as you move forward, we can change it and adjust it as needed. So just thinking around that delivery process for the departments was challenging. I think just the fact that they have to be part of the building of the platform, the building of what they're looking for, and them sitting down to think about, well, what is it exactly that I need? Because we don't necessarily want to recreate the systems that we've been using for 30 years, but it's hard to walk away from that when that's what you're used to. Mm-hmm. So there's been a lot of training, a lot of involvement from the education team, and really buy-in from the leadership is the most important, because if everybody's not on board, then it's hard to talk about it and get a positive feedback. You need to hear it from everybody within the team, a consistent message.
Mm-hmm. And you used the word earlier, and I don't know if you were just using the word or you were using agile development. So that, I don't think of that word with banking much, because like you have a conversion. There's a lot of things that happen, and then you convert. Agile is the idea that we're going to build these 3 features, and then we're going to add 3 more. Then we're going to, and to the point where you could keep developing it over time, but you could get it to where you want it to be, right?
Right.
That was a good guess. Excellent. That's really interesting. And
Yes.
How was that accepted yet?
So when I joined the institution in 2017, my first hire was an Agile coach. So we knew that we would have to change the culture and change the way we operated. We just didn't know how we were going to do it. So we had to practice and fail a lot and fail fast, if you will, and recover and try again.
Yeah.
We ended up changing a lot of the terminology in Agile and Scrum, for example, because people took it as a technology thing. So you have someone in account maintenance or account servicing, and they're like being told to sprint and have stand-ups, and they're like, well, that's a technology thing. So we changed all the terminology. So instead of sprints, we have hikes. So we're located in northern New England. So we have mountains. So we hike, and we have summits, and we have fire towers. So we changed the terminology to try and increase the acceptance. And then we discussed, and it's, this is not a set it and forget it. This is constant. It's every day we have to practice. And a lot of, we had to explain, like, what does it mean? So we use the example of our team. We have some stakeholders come to us and they say, we need a car to go from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. And, traditionally you would immediately start on the project, get the requirements, however long that takes, and start working on that car. And after a couple of years, you deliver the car. With Agile, we start with a Razor scooter, and we give them the Razor scooter, and they're like, great, but it's going to rain. So, a Razor scooter with an umbrella. Maybe we move to a bicycle, maybe an electric bike, but we work on it for 6 months. And after 6 months, we get to this point where they have an enclosed electric bike. And then they say to us, you know what? We've realized we can just take the bus. So instead of spending 3 years in delivering a car and having them tell us they're taking the bus, we've spent 6 months. And
Nice.
we're all better educated for it. We've learned a lot. The stakeholders have learned a lot, and we haven't wasted 3 years.
Nice.
So
Very nice.
People took to that.
And there's a lot to be said for the journey of learning and that failing fast. And I wouldn't necessarily call it failing. It's like learning opportunities, because with every project or every path forward that we chose, like when we started on the cards, we learned a lot. We learned about how our systems integrated with the card network, what we were doing, what we were manually doing that we didn't want to do, our data, where it resides, how is it changing and where. And when we pivoted from that project, it's like, okay, we need to put this down, but we've learned all of this, and now we're choosing a different path forward. So each pivoting moment was still a learning experience that fed into the different path forward. So it was still very beneficial. The 5 years that we spent, and we've pivoted so many times, we got here to a product that truly feeds the need.
Let's talk about that for a second. So would you say you've succeeded? And where are you? If I recall our earlier conversation, you're going to use it, but you're also going to help others?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, we've been operating the data hub for almost a year and a half now in production. You know, we process roughly on average north of 1 million API calls a day, 1.3 million. It's the last time I checked, with the platform, with Stratum, which is the data hub.
Mhm.
We are implementing the Salesforce-based bank ops, which is, you know, the single pane of glass for account maintenance, customer maintenance, product maintenance. It's also our customer 360, so all within the same platform. Our call center operates it, so all of the interactions with the customers are built in. And then marketing is also on Salesforce, so it creates a little bit of that virtuous cycle, so we can take that customer activity and have that impact marketing, and et cetera. So we're right now in the process of implementing a card scheme and card processing. So that is where we start our certification process at the end of the month, and we will hopefully be live on the new platform in September.
Excellent, excellent. When you say Salesforce, does that mean, I don't know if you have treasury services. Do they have access too?
Yes. Yep.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. All in one place.
Yep.
And you're located up in New Hampshire.
We are.
And do you have, this is where the secret sauce starts coming in. Do you have other folks inquiring, looking around?
We do. We hope to implement at 3 institutions in 25.
Wow.
3 other
25,
institutions.
that's this year. Jeez.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We're in process with 3 currently, and then we're working on, you know, what 26 looks like for us as far as other institutions. We're working with quite a few at this point. They all have varying use cases. Some are implementing new gen cores, and they want to operate in parallel with their existing cores. So when you log into, for example, when you log into our digital banking, there's a potential that you could have an account on our new core and accounts on our old core, but you'll see all of the accounts as if they were one core. And so there are institutions that want to be able to do that, basically build new products that they can't on their existing core. And then there are other institutions that want to implement the bank ops and the management pane and, you know, the single pane of glass, and be able to implement their SOP and policy into the workflows. And then others want to connect. They're doing M&A. So that out of the gate, they want to consolidate a GL, and then they want to start consolidating the external platforms, you know, go to a single digital banking platform instead of having 2 or 3.
That's fascinating. So I didn't plan on going down this road, but I come in, I've just acquired another institution. I want to say, I want this to be easier. Moving to your platform makes it all easy. You just bring it all in, no?
Yes. So it creates a centralized repository of your data, and then allows you to, one of the first things one could do is create a consolidated general ledger between the two cores.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing one could do is just start choosing your peripheral platforms, like your digital banking, your BSA, AML. You can say, I want to use this single platform for both institutions. And so as long as those platforms are integrated with Stratum, our data hub, you connect that second core to it, it now has access to those peripherals. You don't have to code that core to all of the other peripherals. You code it you map it to the data model in Stratum. And now once you map to that data model, anything else that's mapped to that data model is now available.
And
so you no longer have one-to-one mappings.
Yeah, not to be dumb, but like, if you guys didn't exist, and, not getting markety at all the decisions that I made where I have gum and staples and, elastics connecting everything together gets multiplied times 2. And you're trying to figure out how my staples fit with your elastics, as opposed to saying, let's both go here.
Yep.
Right.
That's correct.
Yeah. And we know the staples and the gum happen today. I mean,
yes.
We know, but the world doesn't know. It's just, messages like, oh, that'll be posted later, or it'll show up tonight.
Right.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
Biggest lessons learned from the whole process?
Oh my. We will sometimes say that we've been successful due to naivety.
Love it.
We didn't know we couldn't do this when we started.
Love that attitude. I do that attitude. I do not run a bank. So, all right. I love it. I do love it. I wish there was more of it. It's so legacy, the first time you hear that word, it's like, oh, that's nice. It's old, but no, it's not that kind of legacy. Final words. Any thoughts for the audience?
I would say just don't take no. Don't accept no for the answer, or don't accept just because that's how we've always done it. Question everything.
Excellent.
And I would say that in this journey, we've learned that it's not just the legacy core providers, but just there's a lot of industry standards and industry mentality around what banks can and cannot do and where fintechs stand. And often we've heard like, this is the first time that we've seen a bank do this, or banks don't do this. So we've pushed against the grain quite a lot. And it's been a really fun, cool experience, and it's paying off. It's nice to see what we can do as a financial institution. And it's really cool to see people react to what we're able to do, because they're often surprised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's, I can't remember another institution. I can't remember one doing it, but you do say they're out there. One final word on the whole people thing, because I think I don't want to overlook the amount of change you introduced as far as Agile into a bank. It just seems, not to flow. And I imagine, I do imagine there were people that were like, yeah, I'm done. I've done what I've done for as long as I've lived. It's time. But for the folks who embraced it, it's what a great learning experience.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. It's great. It's
yeah,
hard.
and the people alongside you during the journey make a huge difference, because it's hard. It's not easy. Like learning as quickly as we have in the short period of time, 5 years seems like a long time, but when you're in the thick of it, it's a constant. We call Tuesdays Pivot Tuesdays. So often things change, but going through that journey with the right group of people makes a huge difference. So people matter.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of NEACH, your trusted resource in payments, and our guests, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning into the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to hear more about payments innovation and modernization, you can find the Wrestling Payments Podcast on the podcast page of NEACH.org or wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Just search for Wrestling Payments in your podcast app. Thanks for listening.